Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Mendocha, Dr. Speed Selling. This is Raging Verbalist 343. For those keeping track, hopefully you are. Hopefully you're a long time viewer of this channel. Show up every week on YouTube and also my Facebook group, which is the Position to Win book, Position to Win book, which is my book here. So there you go. Just so everybody knows what that's all about. Okay. Don't really dive much into politics and stuff, but sometimes I do. I don't know. But today's kind of a different one, and it's a little different because while I was working on my weekly Speed Start Monday scripting and doing all the things I have to do, and I always put my phone on Do Not Disturb, I noticed I received a WhatsApp call from my assistant, and she, rang me up at 5:38 a.m., which is really not common. She'll usually send me like a WhatsApp text or something. We always talk before Speed Start Monday, make sure I've got everything set, and then that way everything is ready to go. But I noticed that she tried to call me, wasn't able to pick it up fast enough. That I called her back, and because of that, she was in rather a heated, frantic, panic state. I said, "What's going on?" And she goes, "We just had a big earthquake." And I went, "Oh boy." And I said, "Well, I think we're far enough along on the slides you don't have to worry about," which we were, thank goodness. And I immediately went to the web for what had happened. And the initial report that it was a 6.4 magnitude earthquake west of Bogota, Colombia. She lives west of Bogota. Now, I said, "Okay, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Don't worry about what needs to be done. Just take care of yourself and, your fiance and your mother and your grandmother and the whole family and everything." So Speed Start Monday went off without a hitch. And as soon as I finished, I went back to the web and updated it. And they had gone from a 6.4 to a 7.4. And that 1 point makes a big difference for those who understand the logarithmic scales. And if you've never been in an earthquake, trust me, sevens are serious, serious stuff. So I texted her through WhatsApp because I didn't want to tie up the line or the communications, and I don't know how much everything was going on down there. Usually the infrastructure is one of the first things that crashes and fails. Power outages and internet and all that. And she told me she had made it to her grandmother's house and that everything was okay, but there's lots of destruction. She then started sending me pictures and a short video, which confirmed how bad the damage was. Of course, I started watching it on the internet. Contacted my business partner Gabe Batista and said, "Gabe," and he said, "Well, I was just about ready to contact you." And we kind of got caught up because obviously Gabe is originally from Bogota and all that. Now, my own experience of living in Southern California and living through earthquakes is quite extensive. And the first earthquake I ever went through was really more of a minor speed bump. And at the time, it's just a shock to the system because everything starts vibrating and shaking and, your head goes a little crazy. If you've never gone through one, and I don't recommend it, something just drops inside of your head. That panic, that fight or flight just says, "Get the hell out of here." And that panic sets in. And what you believed was solid ground, it's no longer solid ground. Now, my first real serious one is there was what was called the Whittier Narrows quake, which is west of me. Not that close, really, but it was close enough. And it was just over a 6.0 magnitude, if I remember it correctly. But it was rather intense. And I was standing in the doorway to my kitchen. And I could, for the greatest protection, doorways are the best. It's the strongest part of the house usually. Also, I live in a split level house. So I wanted to be on the slab side, but not, the lower story. So stuff doesn't fall on top of me. And I got to tell you, it was insane with my bare feet. There you go. No shoes on. What if windows start popping and things start happening? And the ground was vibrating. That was an eye opener. That was a tell you what's going on. Of course, we turned on the television and we were watching the local news, KTLA Channel 5 at the time, and they were showing the seismograph at Caltech and talking to the pros. And, yeah, it was a serious earthquake. In fact, it was funny because not funny for him, but ironic that one of the announcers for the news station, because they felt it in LA. See, that's the other thing, is that since I'm inland, we get earthquakes in LA, they barely report it. They get basically just a little bit of a rumble, and man, they're just all over it. So here I am. I've lived through that, and I was in pretty much, hey, earthquake happens. Yeah, okay. And by the way, this is where I need to do my public service announcement and say, if you have not put together some kind of bag that you can just go grab that has all the stuff you need, you are really making a big mistake. You should always have that ready for you just in case something bad happens. And that way you've got it. Some people call it, an earthquake protection, or even for power outages, which we get here often because we have, as I've stated many times, really lousy uh, case of electricity. But anyway, so that was pretty rough. But the worst that ever happened to me, again, I'm not diminishing anything that's taking place in Colombia, but the worst thing that ever happened to me is I was flying back from Boston, which is where the company I worked for was based, and flew back late on a Friday night. Oh, dead tired. Got home, like, I don't know, almost midnight, which is 3 a.m. Body clock crashed out, and early in the morning, once a little wake up call hit, and that was a serious earthquake. Now, by this point in time, I didn't jump up like I did the first few times. I just, write it out, okay. Make sure you're not by anything that's dangerous. So the earthquake went on for a little bit longer. So yeah, I got up, and, my wife and I stood in the doorway, and okay. And I said, look, I don't really want to turn on the television and hear all of the yakety yak of this whole thing. And I'm going to just go back to bed. So I'll go and lay back down. And well, wouldn't you know it, just a little bit later, all of a sudden, boom, the next earthquake hits. And this one was bigger than the other one. And so, well, television came on. I wasn't going to go back to sleep. And it turned out that both of them were characterized initially as 7.0 or better. Turned out that the first one was really like 6.8 or 6.9. You always feel a little jip, I mean, hey, if we're gonna live through it, damn it, give me a big one. But the second one was like 7.1, and they were dual earthquakes on two different faults, both about, well, one was 50 and one was about 70 miles away from me, and that was serious. So, all right, kind of collect myself for the rest of the day, knowing that the following day, which would be Sunday, I'd be flying to Seattle for the entire week. And what would happen there? Now, that was not a fun discussion with my wife, who said, can you put off the trip? And well, got the whole week planned, got meetings, Monday through Friday. And okay, all right. So I missed most of it, but what happened is that there were like 400 aftershocks, and her cousin and her significant other were in town, came by and visited, and they were definitely not having any fun of it, of all that. So that's kind of like the earthquake stuff that we're talking about, and that kind of takes precedence over everything else. The thing I ask you to do, if it's at all possible, is to send any kind of relief aid to those who are affected in Colombia, as it has been rather severe and rather destructive. Lives were lost, people are injured, property is damaged. But frankly, the worst thing that comes out of an earthquake is the sense that you will never be on solid ground again. So all I can say is, say your prayers, send your best thoughts, but really send some aid to those who survived in Colombia, because they're going to need all of our help. And hopefully will not be as bad as the earthquake was in 1999, which they had a very severe one and lost well over 1,000 people. So let's hope that that isn't the case. Now, it wouldn't be a Raging Verbalist without at least talking about, and this is, does this tie into an earthquake? Kind of, maybe, no. So most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize that Position to Win is my book. Go check it out at my website, positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com. You can also buy it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. You can go get a physical copy. Also, you can get it digitally by Kindle or Nook or Apple iBooks. And all I can say is hopefully all those in Colombia are doing better. and that the country responds quickly, and hopefully we get better at this. Now, there is lots of proof that we have gotten smarter and better as humans to deal with this, but it is never fun. So with that, I'm going to just leave it with let's hope that everything gets back to normal as soon as possible. This has been John Paul Mendocha, Dr. Speed Selling, and this is Raging Verbalist. And until next time, keep them in your thoughts.